Well, howdy. We are back with another Power Rankings video and race review. Once again, I'll be doing my best to absolutely get the most volume I can out of this. I know I'm talking directly into the mic right now. I'm going to try and angle myself a little bit better. That way I can kind of talk across it. And I'm not too quiet, and I still got decent volume for all of you. So yeah, we are going to talk about China. Obviously, I put the big three guys over there who have the talking points from this last race. And yeah, let's get into this race. And of course, after the end of the video, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of my rankings, my systems. Where am I completely wrong? What would you be ranking instead? And yeah, let's get into it. Alright, now that we got into it, as always, we are just going to go straight into it. We're going to start with our power rankings, start with the bottom, and I think it'll be a surprise as to who's actually at the bottom, because I think that Lance is probably getting a lot of hate right now, but of course, I come up with these rankings across the weekend. One event is not going to determine your ranking. It's analytics based across the entire weekend. Practice is taken into account. Granted, it's very, 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 very minor. I just have to drop that in there, but it's good for whenever we do have like rookies in there. It's a nice little throwing things off, and it helps balance things out ever so slightly whenever there is something wildly out of place. And yeah, we got multiple quality sessions. We got the sprint race, we got the race. So even though we had 3 DNFs, and I consider basically all 3 of those drivers who did DNF to not be at fault, we are taking all 20 drivers into consideration this weekend because they all have competitive race and qualifying sessions that I can base their ratings off of. So let's start at the bottom, as we always do, and we're going to go with Logan Sargent. I know, like, a lot of people are probably saying that Stroll's probably the worst driver of this last weekend, considering everything that happened with him and Ricciardo. But simply put, Sargent was slow. Like, almost every other driver on the grid this weekend had some sort of redeeming quality that I could be like, alright, yeah, no, they had this moment where they messed up, but they were good at, like, something else, this, and this, and this, or performed above expectations in one manner. Like, Logan Sargent this weekend was the epitome of expectations were low, but holy crap. Yeah, he was very, very, very bad. I think he might have been last in both qualifying sessions, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, no, I think he was last by quite a margin, too. It was bad. I know it's his first time at the track, but the same can be said for quite a few drivers on the grid right now, so he doesn't really have that excuse. And then in my next grouping of drivers who are very, very bad this weekend, I put Albon, Stroll, Gasly, Magnussen, and Tsunoda. I don't think anyone's surprised to see like Stroll or Magnussen on this list, but, or maybe even technically Tsunoda. He had a slow weekend. Again, probably he's going to be trying to use the same excuse for himself as Sargent, where it's his first time at the track. But simply put, he's been outperforming Daniel Ricciardo, like, all this season. And Daniel made him look like a rookie. Like, it was a vast difference. Like, a huge difference. Like, this is the first time where I can confidently say, like, Daniel had a good weekend, like a great weekend. That just got ruined by Stroll, of course. But yeah, let's go through all the drivers. Albon, simply put, this was not a good one for him. Normally he can like kind of redeem himself, get into like, at least be that guy who's on the edge and maybe competing for that P10 point if there's like something going on. He wasn't even close. Granted, that could be the car, but China like has the longest straight, I believe, in the entire grid, and like they've got like a couple big long straight sections. I know they have their issues, but they this should be a good track, I would think, for overtaking for them, or at least being able to defend. But simply put, Williams was not having it, wasn't competitive at all, and I think that hurt him. Lance Stroll, I don't think it really needs to be said, completely getting outperformed by Fernando Alonso once again, going out in both Q2 sessions. Meanwhile, Fernando is on the second row of the grid on both races, and then Stroll making that absolutely bonehead, stupid mistake. He's lucky to have finished the race. I think that's the only reason why he's managed to still at least beat P16, is because he managed to not end his own race in that mistake. He was able to continue on at the very least. Pierre Gasly, to me, P17 is kind of the high of his season. Actually, I'm going to check. Let me see, Gasly. Where have your ratings been this season? Yeah, Pierre, this is actually his highest rating of this season, but that's probably arguably because the Alpine car is just so bad. It's so bad that, to me, him being there, this is the highlight of his season so far. This is his absolute best race. Kevin Magnussen, he was just kind of there. I think he outperformed Nico in one of the qualifying sessions, but then in the sprint did nothing. And I think Nico actually got past him in the sprint, and then main qualifying session, did he go out in Q1? I don't even remember. But yeah, didn't do well, got himself into that incident with Tsunoda, basically ruined his own race, and it was a bad weekend for Magnussen. That's why I still say he is absolutely on the edge. If Haas is only going to move one driver by choice this year, it's going to be Magnussen losing his seat. I know there's rumors of linking Hülkenberg to Audi. That might be the only saving grace right now I see for Magnussen, because I think Ollie Behrman is coming in to take a seat. Yuki Tsunoda, that we already talked about him a little bit, but yeah, simply put, bad weekend, P19 in both qualifying sessions. I think he probably maybe could have continued in that race. He probably could have gotten that car to the pits and continued. I think he used Kevin as an excuse for, well, someone hit me, I guess I'm done. I'm ready. And I think that was his, let's just go to the next race. I think that was just him giving up right there, which, yeah, that's not good at all from him. I think that was an excuse that he used. Next group of those drivers who I would have considered to be mid-tier for this weekend. I got Piastri, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Bottas, and Zhou. So I think of this group, the argument could be made for Ocon to be higher. I think this was actually a great weekend for him. I think if he has more weekends like this, he's getting himself into that Mercedes conversation. He's got a great relationship with Toto. I don't see why he wouldn't be getting considered right now. I know I think right now Mercedes has 3 options, maybe 4 options, really. I think plan A, they want Antonelli to do well, but they're not going to make that decision probably until, I want to say Belgium, Netherlands. Probably somewhere around there is when Mercedes is going to make their decision. By that point, I think Sainz will have already made up his mind, so I think he might be off the table. So, because it sounds like Sainz might actually be between Red Bull and Audi right now, one of those two. I think if he goes to Red Bull, it's, done deal. Why would he go to Mercedes? If he goes to Audi, there's still the chance. I think Hülkenberg could be considered for Mercedes. I know he's been linked to them in the past. Same goes for Ocon, who probably has more of a chance with Mercedes, but I could see either one of them. I could see Toto going for a Hülkenberg for a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal just to give Antonelli more time. But if they feel like Antonelli maybe isn't the right guy, or if they want to do something like try and convince him to go to, or try and convince Williams to take him on, something like that, then maybe I could see Ocon getting picked. But ultimately, Mercedes still have decisions there. I think this was a great weekend for Ocon. Oscar Piastri, he had some issues, I think in both races, both the sprint and the main race. So he was kind of held back a little bit, was just kind of there in the middle. It's not bad at all to be in these mid rankings. It's just there wasn't really anything exceptional great about them. Hülkenberg, once again, he had himself a good qualifying, dropped back in the race, and he was able to capitalize and still get that point. This is a pretty good weekend for him. I just don't think it's enough to be considered a great weekend for him. Valtteri Bottas, I think he had himself a very decent weekend. Probably, like, both, this applies for both him and Joe. They missed out on an opportunity to get a point, I think, in the sprint race. Maybe, like, I know, like, qualifying, where was it, P9 and P10, and then the issue to Alonso. I think there was a chance for one of them to finish P8, but they bottled it, simply put, and weren't able to capitalize and take that chance, and I think that kind of brought them down a little bit this week, and it's still probably a good weekend for them, because they didn't really mess up any of their pit stops, and Joe had himself an awesome time at home. It was great to watch. I loved seeing that. I think it's a little over the top, but considering, like, I don't think any other driver gets that home recognition. Yuki doesn't get it in Japan. Fernando or Carlos don't get that in Spain. Charles doesn't get that in Monaco. None of the British drivers get that treatment. Granted, part of that could be because there's so many British drivers. But yeah, that was absolutely nuts. I can't tell if I loved or hated the Parc Ferme thing that they did with him at the end, giving him his own spot on the main straight. But I know they're trying to tap into that Chinese market, but they're not doing that with Logan Sargent in the States, so I don't get why they do that with Zhou in China. Yeah, I'm torn on that one. I'm actually torn on that one because it was cool, simply put. Next grouping of drivers who I think had a great weekend. So I think probably some people might put Norris a little higher, but he bottled his opportunity in that sprint race, and if you look at the numbers there, 7.91 compared to an 8.02, him and Leclerc were very, very close to each other. Very close to each other. So, yeah. There isn't really too much to say there. Norris had himself a great Grand Prix and strategy, but I think Leclerc probably had himself a little bit of a tougher time, and when you looked at it after the practice sessions, after the qualifying, the McLarens simply did look like the better car. To their statistics and everything like that, they don't understand how that happened, but off of like the basic analytics, McLaren looked like they had the better car. So I think Leclerc absolutely got everything he could out of that car. I think that was the one big difference between him and Norris this week, where Norris kind of blew a little bit of an opportunity, at least in the sprint. Yeah. Sergio Perez, this is actually one of his higher ratings, but once again, when the expectation is to be competing for a win and you're not even close, it's kind of disappointing, but P4 is still a good result. Carlos Sainz, I don't think this was necessarily a bad weekend for him. I know he had that moment in qualifying, but he recovered, and ultimately I think the only thing that really set him down was the fact that he kind of got beat by Leclerc this weekend. I know he battled with him a little bit, and he didn't really get the advantage that Leclerc did in strategy, but I don't think this was a bad weekend at all for Carlos. I think he'll bounce back and be more competitive on other weekends, of course, still. P6, Lewis Hamilton. He had a very, very, very mixed weekend. Like, amazing in the sprint qualifying, amazing in the sprint, absolutely exceeded the expectations of that car, but then he had the worst possible result in the next Grand Prix qualifying. And yeah, he turned it around, and he still got himself a couple points in the Grand Prix. Good for him. He's got good race pace. But wow, that was a tale of two different things for Hamilton. George Russell was just more or less pretty consistent. I think P7's the spot for him. I can't really see an argument to put him higher. I can't really see an argument to put him any lower. Simply put, that's kind of just a good spot for him. Alonso, I think he had himself a very, very good weekend. The one main thing that really kind of lowered his rating a little bit was the sprint race, where he took himself out of the race by lunging into Carlos Sainz. He didn't need to do that move. He could have gotten himself a point or two still. I think he would have finished, yeah, because it was Sainz, him, and then Leclerc was behind him, if I'm remembering right. No, Sainz, him, Perez, and then Leclerc. So without that dive, I think he probably would have gotten passed by Perez, but could have gotten himself still ahead of Leclerc. He kind of ruined Sainz's race there, and his own. Well, he definitely ruined his own. He took himself and he had to retire from that race because he had a puncture. Of course, with however many laps that were left, he basically ended his own race at that point. So yeah, that was the one thing that kind of dropped him down. Otherwise, he probably would have been probably a little bit higher, probably maybe up around Perez or Sainz as far as ratings go. Maybe not, maybe if not higher. And then in P9, I put Daniel Ricciardo. I know his actual performance wasn't great, but when I looked at it analytically, qualifying not great, quality pace not great, but his finishing position, when you looked at the balance of the cars, he finished well above expectation. And when you looked at his race pace, actually before of course he got taken out, he was doing good. I think without that Stroll hit, he maybe could have been that driver to get P10. We'll never know, of course, but he was having himself a fantastic weekend. If he had improved his qualifying a little bit, maybe he wouldn't have been in that position, but who knows. Yeah, it's a tough one for Ricciardo, and yeah, I really hope to see him have another weekend like that. You don't really know. There's a kind of randomness going on, and yeah, not a lot of consistency in much of the field at all this year, which is nice. It makes things a little bit interesting, but I don't really know what's going to happen with him. And then, of course, Verstappen was just at the top. He didn't have as good of a weekend for himself. I think this might actually be... Oh, no, it's not his lowest rated weekend. Technically, Bahrain, I rated ever so slightly lower, but they were basically comparable. And a 9.88, where the maximum, I think, technically is a 10.05. But of course, you have to literally be perfect to get that. So a 9.88, that's a fantastic. He's still, he did everything he could. The only thing I think he really did bad for himself was the qualifying session. But he made up for that by lap 9. So that's probably just what lowered him by 0.1%. Yeah. Something crazy like that, but that's what dropped him down. So we have our race awards that we do. Driver of the day, worst driver of the day, recovery, all that jazz. And so where we put driver of the day, I actually put Charles Leclerc because he got everything out of that car. I was debating a little bit between him and Lando. It was really a flip of a coin, but the analytics pointed to Leclerc, so I stuck with that with Leclerc. Worst driver of the day, Lance Stroll. He's not paying attention. He took out a driver. Best recovery this weekend, there wasn't really any driver particular in the race that had a recovery drive, so I'm giving that award to Daniel Ricciardo because between Japan and China, he looked so much better. So I'll give that one to him. Driver that over-delivered on the weekend, Esteban Ocon, because once again, I know they're not expected to be a competitive car, but I would have been putting them at the very, very back of the field, by a margin, and yeah, no, he had himself some good times. He was I think P13, and when the expectations are P18, P17, to finish that high is pretty good. So he's the driver that over-delivered, and in the opposite effect, Logan Sargent, because once again, you are under-delivering because those expectations were low, but holy crap, are you even under-delivering on those expectations? To be that far off the pace in qualifying, and I don't think he was too bad during the race, but I think he still finished in last place of the drivers that finished the race. I can't remember. It might have been Stroll or Magnussen because of their penalties. I don't even know. And yeah, so let's take a look back over my pre-weekend predictions. We're only going to go over the ones for the main Grand Prix. I did do ones for the sprint. You can check that video if you'd like, but we're only going to go for the ones for the main Grand Prix. So I went with essentially Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren. Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren / Alonso, Mercedes. And then Tsunoda, who the heck is that? Tsunoda had been on a roll, so I thought he would be there, Stroll would be right behind, and then kind of the mess of randomness behind with Zhou and the Alpines and Sargent at the back. So where we differed from the qualifyings. The big obvious one where I got wrong, where tons of people were surprised, was, of course, by Lewis Hamilton finishing extremely far behind. And the biggest shock jumping up was, of course, Valtteri Bottas or Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. I don't think anyone really expected the Alpines to be that good. I don't think anyone really expected Sauber to be competitive. I know they've gotten themselves into Q2, but to have gotten into Q3 and then in the sprint qualifying also to get both cars into SQ3 was very good. I know Haas had some upgrades. Hulkenberg did better than expected, and Alonso was fantastic in qualifying this weekend. I wish they gave him some better strategies and he didn't mess up that sprint race. This could have been a fantastic week for him. Yeah. And then, of course, we had my pre-weekend race prediction. I took out the drivers that did DNF because there's no way to predict that. So what we have here is this. We got Verstappen right, of course. No one's too shocked. Norris finished better than expected. Perez dropping down one. That could be just simply due to strategy. Leclerc finished right where I expected him to. Sainz was a couple spots back. Russell up one. Alonso up one. Piastri probably a little bit disappointing, but he had his issues during the race. I guess he took some damage in that Stroll-Ricardo battle. Well, not battle, safety car incident. Hamilton, he still managed to finish where I expected him to, even with that poor qualifying. Hulk got himself that point. I thought Tsunoda might have been able to take, but he had his own DNF. Ocon and Gasly finished way above expectations. Albon and Zhou finished exactly where I expected them to. Lance Stroll was awful. Kevin Magnussen was awful. Logan Sargent was awful. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps things up. Oh yeah, we just want to take a very quick look at my predictions ratings to see how we've been doing, and technically this was just ever so slightly better than my predictions for Japan, but still not as good as my predictions for Australia. We'll see how that keeps up, and of course I'll update those flags as we get to them. I'm not really worrying too much about that, and we have Miami coming up in a couple weeks. In the meantime, if you aren't already, I will continue to stream and play some games on Twitch. As always, we will be playing some F1 Manager, probably a little bit of NHL, and then I think I kind of want to dabble into playing some Fallout with the TV series just coming out. It's piqued my interest in playing the games again, and I want to play through Fallout 4 again. I would love, I've never played New Vegas or Fallout 3, but I've heard they're fantastic, and I applied to stream on TikTok, but I don't know if I'll get that or not. But yeah, give me a follow on the socials, and I would love to see people come around and hang out. We just have a good chill time and hang out, and yeah, it's a vibe. Thank you all very, very, very much for watching. Once again, let me know what you think. Where am I completely wrong? And yeah, I really wish I could include all of my data points in this that shows how I got to the numbers that I got to, but it doesn't really fit well on the screen. But maybe at some point I'll figure that out in the future. All right, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a good day or a good night, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care.